Sails of Glory, ship-to-ship combat during the Napoleonic Wars, a game published by Ares. This game did very well on Kickstarter last year. I think it exceeded the projected amount of money they needed by several times. It was sold out soon after it was released, and now they reprinted a copy, so this time I was able to get one. Ship-to-ship combat based on the same engine, the same core ideas that you have in Wings of Glory and Wings of War, both games by Ares, and also the system has been used in other games such as Star Wars Miniatures. Very cool system to regulate miniature units. To have a miniature game which is, however, very easy to play, much easier to play than many miniature games out there. This game, well, it's about the Napoleonic Wars. It is a naval game, and I'm excited about this too because I really like the core engine, the core idea. I liked it when it was about air fighting, and I wanted to see how it was implemented in a different theme, a different setting, and just a completely different philosophy of wargaming. Something to say about the game before we start. The game can be played in pretty much 3 versions. The rulebook has 3 main sections. One explaining the rules for the basic game. The basic rules are really basic. You probably won't be interested in playing those unless you're planning to play the game with some very young gamer. I think most gamers, even the casual ones, will want to start at least from the standard game. So you have a slightly more complex version with the standard game, and then you have the advanced rules for the advanced game, and that is the game that I played. Because even though it's called advanced, it is really not that hard. It is really still more linear than most war games out there. And then you have optional rules, which if you decide to use them, actually they add even more details, so maybe that should be called the advanced game, the PhD advanced game. And those optional rules, you can choose which ones you want, all of them, none of them, mix and match. So there's a lot of variety of experiences that you can have with this set of rules, because there's a lot of customization that you can have as you pick and choose the parts of the rulebook that apply to you and that you think will fit your group's needs best. So in the next section of my video I'm going to tell you about the advanced game. In the conclusions of the video I'll mention some of the differences between the advanced and the standard one, because I think these are going to be the 2 versions that will be most interesting for most gamers, and I'm going to skip the basic rules just in the interest of time. Okay, without further ado, let's talk about Sails of Glory advanced game. Each ship in the game is represented by a model, a really nice looking model. We'll take a closer look later at some of the models in the game. So you have the model of the ship, you have a log, which is like a little puzzle, 3-piece puzzle, which you place in the mat that every ship has. But you personalize, you individualize your mat by placing your log there, which is used to keep track of the damage that your ship takes. Each ship also has a card with the stats of the specific card. And then each ship has a deck of maneuver cards, which actually is divided in 3 groups. You have a deck of standard maneuver cards, which you use to regulate regular movements. Then you have a group of cards with a red border, and those are used when your ship is taken aback because of the wind. And then you have a group of cards which you use to regulate movement when one or more of your masts have been destroyed or have been damaged by the opponent. Some important things on the mat. On the mat you also have an area where you place counters indicating the shots that you have available on your broadsides. Here you place the shot marker for the left broadside and here the one for the right side. In the advanced game there are several types of shots that are available, so you keep the shot for each face down so the opponent doesn't know exactly which type of shot you have loaded on your broadsides. There's also an area where after you fired, you will place the next shots that need to be reloaded. But it takes a turn for the guns to be reloaded. That means after you fire, there's a turn in which you can't fire, in which you're reloading, and then you can fire again. And there are, as I said, different types of shots, and you can use different types of shots and change your shots around as you are reloading. But a broadside won't be able to fire more often than every other turn. Here also we have an area where you move an indicator to indicate the setting of your sails. The closer the indicator is to the left side, the faster your ship goes, and then it can go all the way until here when you have struck sails and you're not moving at all. And here we have an area where the players will place action markers. Each player in the advanced game receives a set of action markers. The number of action markers that you can use depends on the number of queue members that you have available. When it is your turn to plan, when it is the time to plan your actions, you simply place the markers there face down to indicate the actions they will take that turn. Suppose they want to fire with the left broadside. I want to change the setting of my sails by moving it to the left from less to more sails available. I want to repair some damage and to reload, repair some damage, it's here, and to reload the broadside. There you go. So you plan your actions there, they should be face down when you're planning your actions. Then when you reveal them, that indicates the type of actions that you will be able to take that turn. You execute the actions that you committed to. Also, as for movement, like in games in the Wings of War, Wings of Glory system, you will plan your movement in advance and then you will have to execute it. And much like in Wings of War World War II and Wings of Glory World War II, you need to plan one movement card ahead. That means that there will be 2 cards by your mat pretty much at all times. In the current turn, you will reveal the first card. You will use it in conjunction with your model to regulate and determine the movement of your ship, and we'll see how that is done later. Then this card, still face down, will become your next card. You will plan the following movement by putting a card face down there. And you continue like this, revealing and executing one card, shifting the next turn card to the number 1 position, and planning the following turn. So each turn you need to select the actions that you're going to perform in that turn and the maneuver that you're going to perform next turn. The models representing ships in this game are just so good looking, and pre-painted too, which is great because I don't paint miniatures. They just look so great. That is one. I'm gonna show you another one just to give you a better sense. Excellent, miniatures. Well, in plastic, so you have to be careful. I don't think they're all that strong and resistant. Each miniature is mounted on a plastic base, and inside the plastic base there is a card that actually has some important stats related to your ship. You have the cones of fire that come out of the 2 broadsides. The central one you use when you are firing your full broadside. It should be the other way around. When you are able to use this cone, it means that you're firing with your entire broadside. If you're using this cone of fire or this cone of fire, only part of your broadside is fully effective because you're using the forward or aft part of your broadside. Very important for movement are these colored bands that you see around the ship. Red, orange, or green. And we'll see how those work in a second. So, your movement is determined by the card that you played for this turn. And as you may expect from a game inspired by Wings of War, you will place the card in front of your unit and you will use the card to move. But as you can see, there are 3 possible tracks here. Remember when I showed you the sails setting? Well, depending on your sails setting, you will choose the track corresponding to the sails setting that you have. For example, I'm going at full sails, then I use this one, battle sails, this one. Suppose that I'm going at battle sails. So I place this in front of my card. At full sails, I would put the card here. With less sails available, I would put it there. But I'm using the central one because I'm using the battle setting. So I put it there. But how far should my ship go? Well, here's the thing. In the game there is wind. You have a compass which is set at the beginning of the game. It indicates the general direction of the wind in the game. Each player also can use one of these indicators here to determine the distance that your ship will cover this turn. Use this indicator. You put it in the same direction as the wind, and you set it by your main mast. That would be like that. In many cases, your direction is so obvious you don't actually need to check it, but in case, you have this tool here. The color band, which is crossed by this indicator, is the one that you will use. In this case, for example, I will use the green band of that card. Well, the green band is crossed. I will go move my ship to the green mark of the track that I use. If my indicator is crossing an orange band, then I use the orange band. Well, I go to the orange distance, but we said it was green. It was more or less like this. Then, in this case, I'll simply move my ship from here to here, placing the back of the ship right there. Here we go. And this is how you execute the movement. You check the angle, you check the sailing, the settings of the sails, and you move your ship to the corresponding location. It may be, however, that you're being taken back from the wind, by the wind, because your indicator crosses the red band of the ship. In that case, you need to use one of these cards. And which one? There are three of them. The card that you use depends on the veer value of the card that you were trying to implement and that you can't because there is the red band here. So basically when this happens, the card that you had planned is not resolved, it is replaced by one of these cards. Each card has a veer value here, which actually is also important when you're selecting your next turn's card, because each ship also has a certain veer value. For example, this one has a veer value of 5. When you're planning a maneuver, you cannot have the card that you're planning to play next turn cannot have a veer value which is higher than the veer value of your ship. This ship has a veer value of 4. If I play the card with a maneuver of 2, I don't have one right now to show you. There you go. A maneuver of 2. The next turn I would not be able to play a card with a maneuver of 8. Only could be up to 7, and this prevents unrealistic behavior. But again, you simply may not be able to perform and to use the card that you have planned because you find yourself in a disadvantageous position in regard to the wind. And then you have one of these cards that you're going to use. This one, if the veer value of the card that you were trying to resolve is 4 or less. This one if it is exactly 5, this one for 6 or more. Each red card also has 2 sides, one with 1 sand clock and one with 2. The first side you use the first turn in which you find yourself in this position at this angle, and the second side you use next turn and following turns if you still are in that condition. After all ships have moved, and that happens simultaneously, all ships fire against each other simultaneously too. That means that the players resolve combat, they determine the damage that they inflict on one another, but the effects of that damage is not felt, is not in play until the end of the turn. Until everybody got a chance to place a hit on the opponent. Now, to determine if you're able to hit the opponent or not, you use this ruler here. There are 2 that come with the game and they're all the same, and you place the ruler in one of your arcs of fire, and you see if you're able from that position to touch the base of one of your opponents, the opponent you're trying to fire on. If you can reach the opponent with more than one arc of fire, you should choose the central one because that is the best one. In this case, for example, this ship would be able to fire on that opponent using the central arc of fire, which is again the full broadside. This the ship, however, would not be able to fire on the opponent using the full broadside, but could fire using the forward arc of fire. Oops, and we already hit that one. Now, what happens when you're able to trace a line of fire to your opponent? The color of the band that you're using to reach the opponent is the one that is used to determine the type of damage that you inflict. For example, from this distance, this ship can inflict an orange damage on that ship. This other one, well, it would be orange 2, I believe. Yes. If it's farther than that, you use the yellow band, and that inflicts yellow damage, which is also indicated by the letter A. Then we have the letter B for the orange one. If you're really close to the opponent and you have loaded chain bolts or grape shot, then you're able to inflict C or D damage, respectively. That means that a certain number of damage counters will be randomly drawn from the counter mix that you have. You place them in cups randomly. Here I've organized them into a container, which is not included with the game. It's just what I'm using. And here you have counters for A-type damage, B, C, and D damage, and also E damage, which actually is inflicted during musket fire. If the ships are close enough, then actually they can be connected with the width of the ruler, then that means that the ships can fire against each other with musket fire, which is resolved by drawing E damage counters. Okay, so the distance and the angle will tell us the color, the type of damage that is inflicted. But how many points of damage, how many markers are going to be randomly drawn? Well, to determine that, you look at the log of the ship that is firing. This is the line that you use to determine the number of damage counters that are used when firing with the guns, and this is the amount of damage that can be inflicted when firing with muskets. You use the numbers indicated in the leftmost available box of the track. For example, at the beginning of the game, the Généreux, when firing with the guns, can inflict 4 markers of damage using the left broadside, 4 using the broadside, the left broadside, but the front or the aft, 7 with the central fire with the full broadside, and 4 with the right forward or aft broadside. As the ship takes damage, damage markers will be piled up here. They will fill up the boxes, so that will reduce the power of the guns, and that will reduce the number of markers that are drawn when inflicting damage on the opponent. So simply, the player that takes hits draws the corresponding amount of damage markers and places them on the leftmost available track of that box of his track. Now, there are several types of damage that can be inflicted, and they can be simple numerical values. You can just have a number. It can be a 0. Well, you're lucky. It can be a numerical value. When you have numerical values, you place them in the leftmost box available. And when you have a total of damage in a box which equals or exceeds this value here, which is the burden of the ship, then you flip that counter, that stack of counters, to the backside, and you start piling up things in the next box. That means, for example, if I have here, for example, a 2, and then I draw 1, then the 1 still goes there, and then because 3 and 1, 2 and 1 is 3, not yet 5, I have a 4, now I exceed that, and I flip these to the other side, face down, and I start piling counters up in the next box. As I said, sometimes a single hit would be enough to fill a box, and sometimes it takes several. There are special hits. You place the hit there as a normal numerical value, count the number normally, but there's also a symbol that indicates a special damage. Then you use other markers to indicate other types of damage in other parts of the board. For example, there's a damage to the crew and a damage to the hull, to the guns. So you place a 2 there, which counts as a 2, and then you also have another mark that you take from a special pool, and you place it here to indicate that now one unit of your crew has been wounded, as is not operative. There are other markers that simply have a crew damage, in which case you simply place the crew damage there. Boxes in the crew track only can take a single counter before they're full. So as you take damage, the number of available markers that the opponent will draw when hit is reduced. The same applies to musket fire. The less crew members you have available, the less damage markers will be inflicted because due to musket fire. Also, this other number here between by the little hand and between the two tracks indicates the number of action markers available. So if you have a lot of crew hits, for example, you have crew hits that cover your track all the way until up to here, then you only have 3 actions available instead of the 4 that you have at the beginning of the game. These are the actions that you have available each turn, and again they can be to change the setting of your sails, can be to fire, can be to reload, and very important, as your ship starts taking hits, they can be to repair damage. There are several types of damage that can happen. Different types of damage will have additional negative effects. When you remove a damage, or in any case when you repair the ship, you simply remove the corresponding markers from the track, and then you shift the possible remaining damage towards the left. And if you're interested in playing the standard game instead of the advanced game, it is pretty much the game that I explained here without the special damages. So every time that you draw a damage chit with a symbol on it, you simply count it as a standard damage, and also without the actions. So you simply get to fire, and after you fire, your broadside takes 1 turn to reload, so you still fire every other turn, but automatically you do not have to spend actions, so no special damage and no action chits. However, that also means that you do not get to change the setting of your sails, and that is something that I really like. Even if I can play for simplicity the game without special damages and the game without the actions, I really like the idea of being able to choose the track and to change the speed at which my ship is going. So actually, there is nothing that prevents you from coming up with variants. This is something so good about this manual. You can really make whatever you like with it. It's so easy to come up with variants. So for example, I could envision myself playing the standard game with automatic actions, so you don't have to commit to actions by using cheats, without special damages, but with the ability to change the setting of your sails. You can simply give the players the option of changing setting once for free per turn, and you have that variety there without any added complexity. Yes, if you do use all of these rules, so there are a little more procedures that you have to do. Selecting actions every turn may slow down the game a little bit, especially if you have many players. No big deal. And then, however, there will be times in which the actions will be pretty obvious, so it becomes a little perfunctory that you have to choose the actions every turn. Yes, a little more procedures that you have to go through than you would have, for example, in Wings of War or Wings of Glory. Also damage, yes, it's more procedural, more things that you have to take into account, the stacks that you have to make, and you have to flip them. Sometimes sometimes the damage marker indicates a damage that you need to take another counter from the box to represent. Is that going to be a deal breaker? I don't think it is going to be for most players, because there's extra little bit of procedures that you have to implement, give you a lot more detail, a lot more chrome, a lot of historical flavor. And this is really one of the strengths of the system, as it was in the previous implementations of the system. You do have a very good thematic sense, you have a very good amount of theme, I would say, with a relatively lean, a relatively economic engine. Compared to war games where in order to have a lot of detail you need to remember a lot of rules and exceptions to those rules and exceptions to those exceptions and sub-cases. Here pretty much there's so much stuff that is hardwired in, for example, the mix of each group of damage to the crew working a certain way, heavy damage to the hull works in a different way. You do not have to remember many rules about this, you simply have to remember the color of the pool from which you're going to draw a chit. Maneuverability of the ships and how the ships behave, that is pretty much hardwired in the deck of maneuver cards that you have. Yes, there are more things to remember than, say, in Wings of War or Wings of Glory, more steps to take, but I think that there is an exponentially larger amount of detail, chrome, and theme that comes out with really little extra investment, and to me this is a good thing. Other things about the game: it looks great, it looks beautiful, it has that exciting element that you have in all games based on secret selection of actions, because there's a lot of possible bluffing. You're trying to read the mind of your opponent and to think and to figure out what the opponent thinks that you'll think. You can get lost in that and at the end say, whatever, I'll just play a random card, which maybe will be great precisely because the opponent doesn't expect that. There is that fun to be had when you reveal the cards and you see where the ships go. There's an extra factor here that I like very much, which is that the board is not neutral like you have in Wings of War, Wings of Glory, or in Star Wars Miniature. There's wind, and the wind is a huge element because, of course, it changes the things that you can do and how well you can do them, which also means it somewhat gives information to the opponent, making the opponent think that certain things that you may do will be more or less likely. Are you going to go for the path of less resistance, or to take some crazy maneuver that then can get you to temporarily lose control of your ship? One thing seems more reasonable, which also means that doing the unreasonable thing may be counterintuitive, which means maybe a good option to surprise the opponent, unless the opponent thinks that you're precisely going to do the least likely thing. To have that extra element adds to the mind game, to the meta game behind the movement of the ships, to the meta game and the mind game behind the selection of actions and trying to see what the opponent is going to do. I like the fact that your actions are somewhat tied up. You have to plan in advance and you have to perform what you planned earlier, even if the situation has drastically changed and now that has become the most stupid thing that could possibly be done. You committed to that one and you have to do it. I like the fact that these ships, you don't drive them like bumper cars. They do not have the maneuverability. They are tied to the environment, they are tied to the choices that you make, they're tied to the physiological time that it takes for the crew and the ship and the parts of the ship to implement certain changes. I like all these things very much. The game also has a strong story element, a strong narrative component. It feels intensely thematic, again, when in reality being pretty lean and pretty economic when it comes to the rules and the procedures. More than in Wings of War, not many when you compare it with other games, not many compared to the richness and depth of the final experience. Sails of Glory, a great new addition to the system. I'm very excited that I played it, I'm very excited that it's out there. I can't wait to see more ships, more models, more scenarios. It is definitely a system that got me excited right now, and I'm excited to see how the system will develop in the future.